People who grew up in a small town. What's the dark secret? 600 people. You belong to one of two intermarried families or are new in town. At 3 generations of living in the area, we were new in town. Someone I grew up with all through grade school turned out to be a pedophile. Had massive amounts of it and distributed it. He later had a kid with his girlfriend solely to use. Used to play with him on the playground. He seemed so normal. The guy who used to sell me coke at a local bar 20 some years ago is running for mayor. He's probably gonna win, too. Literally everyone is related because of how incestuous my family was from 50 years ago to today. I'm the only one who hasn't had a kid with a cousin. Where should I start? The vice principal of the elementary school caught for soliciting nudes from students. In the 80s an Amish guy was brutally murdered and buried and it was unsolved for a bit but no one talks about it. Some doctor murdered his wife and, know it, a 9-year-old little girl who wants to be a journalist covered the story hours before any professional journalist reporter knew about it. It's very classist here. You can get away with almost anything if you or your family donate enough to the community or are respected. So cases of sexual harassment, rape, hit and runs have been swept under the rug. Our town budget is funded almost entirely through speeding tickets. Our budget for 2020 was $866K. Our police department took up $456K of that. Last year officers wrote $765K worth of speeding tickets. We have a population of 2K people. The family of the town drunk put up an above ground pool the same day he disappeared. I'm pretty sure he's buried under there. The state high school principal of the year resigned due to having an affair with several women including the school nurse. He broke up several marriages. I grew up in a small town. I assure you there were absolutely no secrets. After church on Sunday talked to the old ladies. They knew everything in town. Nothing slipped past them and everyone knew everything. That was the weekly ritual after church. Talk to them and catch up on the weekly gossip column. Way too many. The local priest was a pedo and when someone tried to expose him the town rallied around him. They threatened the family of the kid and harassed them so bad they had to move. I have 3 friends he molested who are still afraid to come forward to this day. The school board rigged it so that all supplies for school maintenance were bought from a hardware store at an outrageous markup because the store was owned by a board member. Everyone on the football team was using steroids. There's an old deserted runway used by drug smugglers in Florida with $15 million buried there. Not dark but nobody knows where it is. Just the general location. It was last used in the 70s and only came to light in the last decade. There was money buried there. Probably isn't but who knows. I grew up in a small town that turned into a huge city. Cape Coral, Florida. Development happened so quickly that the majority of people didn't realize that they built there. Very expensive homes in major flood zones. Most people here don't understand that flood insurance has to be purchased separately from home insurance. One major hurricane in the wrong spot can literally destroy Cape Coral, Florida. There are tunnels under the old library and they rarely let people in there. IDK, what's up with that? That same library has a room that you have to have a special card to enter and it's filled with documents and blueprints for the whole city. It's pretty cool, and very few people know about it. I'm not sure if this is considered dark, but I thought it was cool enough to share. The KKK's Indiana Grand Dragon, Richard Loy, lived in my hometown. He is also the son of international imperial wizard, Rylton Loy. His son rode my bus for like 2 weeks. His dad would stand in front of their house with no shirt on and a revolver on his belt with him until the bus came. Then one day they either moved or he dropped out of school or something because he stopped showing up and I never saw him again. If they're under 45, dead, and hadn't had a church bake sale fundraiser for their family before they passed, it was an OD on fentanyl that got them. I had Narcan in my bag starting in high school, and I'm in my 30s now. All the wealthy farmers and their families constantly complain about the high crime rate and illegal aliens, yet they are the ones who are employing all of the illegal aliens with jobs. That's why I am so pro for a clear path to legal immigration. As of right now it's a ton of good people coming to the US to only be used for essentially slave wages. And then on top of that a small portion that sneak in with them are cartel drug running related, so crime goes up. At a local park there is a legend that a man in a monkey mask parkers around the park and runs from kids. That was my older brother and I'm looking forward to carry on his legend. The pig farmer I grew up next to would feed dead bodies to his pigs to get rid of the evidence. He never killed anyone himself, but would dispose of the bodies of other people's kills. He wouldn't take any bodies that weren't justice kills, though. The cops didn't do jack it in that area, so people would take it upon themselves to make sure justice happened. It wasn't often that people died. Usually they got the it beaten out of them repeatedly. Last I heard he moved away and doesn't dispose of bodies anymore. I went to a private school until 7th grade, when I moved to public middle school, and the owner headmaster of that private school was a bad dude. Teacher S were doing drugs in the restroom and one of my family members that worked there found out and spoke up. They were put on suspension for slander and later fired. Another teacher had been with my family member to see the drugs, but because they didn't have their license to teach they wouldn't speak up when it went public in fear of losing their job. The owner headmaster's children were druggies, doing heroin coke, and one eventually ran someone over and killed them on accident. Aussie here. Spent half my life in a very rural property, half city, going back and forth weekly, monthly. I found that there's normally not only a load more of family pedophile behavior rurally but also rurally. Catholic country tiny town. You were punished for ever speaking out as it was deemed in the community as being socially unacceptable. Backward, disgusting way of behaving if you ask me. My town wasn't that small, but my temple was, and everyone knew each other. When I was in high school, the cantor, who was easily in his mid-60s, was sleeping with the choir director and she got pregnant. He was married with 2 adult children already. I know the cantor and his wife eventually got divorced. Choir director had a baby, and he ended up retiring at some point. Nothing like becoming a dad in your 60s. The dark secret is that over the course of a year, a bunch of teens from great, middle to upper class families committed suicide for no reason. They were all around the same age, went to the same school, and hung out in the same circle of friends. It started with one, and others kept doing it. They all hung themselves, some in very gruesome and shocking ways and places. Police investigated it but never got to the bottom of why. These people were my friends too, so I knew the details, but had moved an hour away during the worst of it. I'm glad I moved away. Something was wrong with that whole community at the time. Dark but not a secret. Local kid accidentally killed his good friend while screwing around with a firearm and held the police at bay for 10 hours before committing suicide. Woman on the town council, ultra rich, recently had a party where they had prostitutes engage in devious activities with goats. The Kushners used eminent domain to evict people from their multi-generational homes, then created P Village. Someone found 3 dead bodies in a ditch. No evidence as to how they died. Back in 1918 a tornado wiped out a church and the headstones from the cemetery out back. At some point the city back then designated this area as a park to keep anyone from digging, but for some reason almost everyone forgot about the church and cemetery, which was odd because there is a much bigger park just 1 block down the street. Anyway, just a few years ago the city was thinking about doing something else with this lot when a few old timers and those of us who read about it in town archives at the library mentioned this to them. So the city brought in a ground radar crew and sure enough, lots of bodies. So now the park has a little more equipment and still no mention publicly of the cemetery on site. I live in a no stoplight no stop sign town and know that has a runway because the richest family here ran drugs for the cartel decades ago. The guy who took the heat for them when they got busted lives in a mansion now. The family now owns the gas station and runs the school here, and somehow or another they prevent new businesses from opening in town. Oh, where to begin? Super rural Canada, so there's probably a serial killer preying on indigenous women. We're not on the highway of Tez, but it's not entirely unreasonable to assume an isolated town with rampant drug use not too far removed from said highway would be on their radar. Lots of incest too. There's the aforementioned drug use. Lots of sex crimes that go unreported, plenty of domestic violence with a splash of victim blaming. Oh, and one of the chiefs is a rabid conspiracy theorist who may or may not plan to burn down the 4G Cell tower cause the government is using 5G to spread COVID or whatever. Also there's that time a bull moose broke into a rancher's pasture and got really friendly with the cattle. All the cowboys are really gay. It's awesome. When I was in grade school, a biracial couple bought a house in town. Within a month, a message was left on their yard and painted on their garage. They moved shortly thereafter. The town was relatively diverse last time I was there, but the undercurrents of segregation still exist. This was 40 plus years ago. Not secret anymore, but the Sandusky scandal. Sashka, girl's name, made blowjobs for $20 lever, about $13, at her apartment, but no one was brave enough to ask her for one. Quite some, but that one here is my personal favorite. Some dude apparently disposed of his wife in the 1960s the almost exact same way as in the Stephen King novel Oz 1922, just they never had anything substantial on him and he was certainly not hunted by any spirits or rat ghosts. Beck. He was still quite alive and well 3 years ago, at almost 100. They investigated him for almost a decade and he always sticked with his story of his wife just up and left him and the kids one morning. But basically everyone over 70 those days in my hometown knows that lady's downer filled up well in a certain area. Nobody's ever called him out directly in plain daylight on it though. Oz because that guy is a known former SS member and knows how to let someone disappear without a trace. Quote my grandma and every other senior citizen. There were many Chinese immigrants in my town since its foundation and they created an underground city connected through tunnels below many businesses owned by them. They trafficked alcohol and other stuff until a big fire happened in the underground city and that's how the secret came out. Unfortunately, many died. Now anyone can visit the underground city, but only certain areas because you can get lost. From Point Pleasant, WV. Secret is we made up the Mothman for tourism dollars. Thanks for the economy boost that one weekend a year in September. My hometown is currently going through a big cheating scandal. One of the assistant football coaches left his playbook out. His brother is the head coach at a rival town and took pictures of the playbook using it against the hometown school. Cheater coach didn't mean harm and hope the incident doesn't interfere with the season. Cheater school won the football game in a huge blowout. Obviously, school got a sternly worded letter and a small fine from the State Athletic Association. Another nearby town had a football game shut down at halftime because an anti-mask group showed up and made trouble over the mandatory mask rules at the game. The local pub cook poisoned a family, killing them all with rat poison when she put it in a pie. She then raised the only surviving family member, a baby boy, and when that boy was an adult he married the cook's daughter. I don't know all the details. I found a copy of newspaper online when I was researching the area, but the pub is still open and the cook stayed working at it after the manslaughters. One dude ducked his sheep. I don't know how much of a secret it was, but the mayor was the town drunk. I'd heard someone joke that all it took to join the local police was the ability to hold up a drunk mayor, but thought it was just that, a joke. A couple years later, I went to a high school game and watched two officers carry a man between them that was so drunk. He was passed out, drooling all over himself. I asked one of my friends who was that, and they said that was the mayor. The other thing is the county commission. You know how you'll see in the news that a local government will give a company tax breaks to set up in their community? With this place, every member on the commission owns the larger local companies, and not one pays over minimum wage. When they meet with prospective companies, the very first question they ask is how much will you pay new employees? If the answer is a dime over minimum wage, they'll refuse to give them any tax breaks, so the company goes on to another place. I live in the oldest city in the US. We are a big tourist destination. Our dark secret is that every single one of the locals absolutely hates these tourists. We sneer, roll our eyes, and laugh at them behind their backs. We repeat what they say to our friends in high-pitched, whiny voices and revel in their absence during the off months. We actively try to get every cent we can out of them when they do show up. No lie, it's a very deep-seated hatred. Yet every single one of the locals will smile to a tourist's face and tell them to have a wonderful day. Bunch of two-faced, lying actors. Every single one of us. The only reason we even put up with them is because we need their money to survive. My grandmom's town of 5,000 people, best known as where the actual Camp Crystal Lake from Friday the 13th is located, also had a brutal and solved murder a few years later. Unrelated, there's a haunted tractor. The local football team is a whole can of worms, doping, strange punishments, verbal abuses, unfair treatment of some players, but the community kinda turns a blind eye so that the playoff streak doesn't get ruined. This is more of a recent thing, but it still counts. I live in a small town where everyone knows everybody. Well, there was this little girl, first grader, and she died in a car crash because her dad, who was DWI and on drugs, shouldn't have been a parent in the first place. Every store has been holding fundraisers for her funeral expenses. The dad is being charged with manslaughter and DWI. It really shook us. I don't know what constitutes as a small town for some people, but in Saskatchewan, I grew up in a town of around 1,000 people and that's a normal small town. The secret is that there isn't really anything that crazy or secretive. Biggest secret was that the guy nicknamed Bicycle Bob didn't even ride a bicycle. Town economy is pillared by a contracting firm. Turns out it's easy to get away with drunkenly killing someone when your family owns said firm. Just scot-free. Everything gets swept under the rug for the redacted family. You do some digging and you find out the guy who killed your friend isn't the only one the cops look the other way for. I love that place. Every time I have the unfortunate fate of having unfinished business there, I discover it has someone turned more vile and hate-filled. Supposedly Native Americans were forced to leave the land where the town I grew up in is now. I've never really found records of it, but I don't doubt it. Population of 150. The houses were so cheap in 1990 because there was a father that murdered his 6-year-old daughter on the sidewalk in front of their house and then crashed his car into a telephone pole, killing himself. My family moved in across the street from the scene a year later. Also, my friend now lives in their old house. We used to be a sundown town. Basically, if you were black and here after nightfall, all bets were off as to your safety. We even had a sign warning as such. We're located right in between a nuclear research lab and an abandoned insane asylum. There are a million dark secrets. Take your pick. Not exactly a dark secret, but there's an abandoned car in a back alley teenagers take bats to and just wail on it. One of the gym teachers allegedly sleeps with seniors as soon as they are of age. A young woman went missing some years back. The police handled the whole situation terribly. Years later it was discovered one of the cops was cheating on his wife with her. The same cop leading the investigation. The same cop who had lost all evidence and DNA samples from the case. Most agree he did it, yet there's no proof. There's an unsolved murder in my Illinois hometown of two newlyweds in the 1980s. She worked for a guy who was in the dog food business, but everyone thinks he was in some shady it, like running guns, and she saw something she wasn't supposed to see. Two guys were arrested, convicted, and sentenced to death. Their sentences were commuted to life and then they were released after 20+ years due to an investigation by a group of law students in Chicago. People still think the dog food guy was involved, but I believe he's in Florida now. P.S. The story has been on 48 Hours multiple times. We have an alarming number of missing people and unsolved murders. Every few years someone will find a skeleton in the woods and they'll DNA or dental match it to someone gone missing from years ago, but rarely are those murders ever solved. A local politician was a porn star for years at the same time he worked at the council. No one knew he was a pornographic film actor because they'd reveal themselves watching porn. So when someone wrote a letter to local council about him and his second job, he got fired. I worked in retail at the time and this dude bought his groceries where I worked and he was a super nice guy. Always made some small talk and put the change in the charity box. The high school football coach knew about many abuse allegations involving his players, yet said nothing to the school or parents in order to attract interest from college scouts. Absolutely disgusting. There's tunnels under the school. Well, they never proved that Uncle Leonard killed the guy who walked on a charge of raping Leonard's daughter, but he sure got retired from the state patrol in a hurry. There's a secret cult that goes around killing anyone who ruins the village's chances of winning the Village of the Year contest. But for real though, I live in the city of Wells where Hot Fuzz was filmed, and that's pretty much the darkest secret this place has to offer. A ridiculous number of folk I grew up with could walk down the street, say hello to someone and not realize they were talking to their brother or sister. Apparently wife swapping was really popular in the 70s. Our vicar back in the late 80s had affairs with multiple parishioners, and one of my classmates was potentially a child of said affair, but no one ever said anything, brought it up, dared ask. There's only one high school in our town school system. Track coach is in charge of security. Assistant coach is a security guard who used to go to the school. Maybe 25 now with 2 kids. I don't know how many students, but he's had 6 with multiple students. Track coach head of security never did anything about it because he is a great track coach. Also, don't know much about this other situation, but apparently another former guard assaulted a student and was sent to work at the middle school with younger kids. Yeah, there's also the half dozen fights this one week every spring, bomb gun threats, etc. But I think those are fairly normal. My maternal grandmother was the town junkie. She had done most drugs I've heard of, and I'm sure many that I haven't, and was also mentally ill. Definitely schizophrenic and most likely more, but eventually she was too fried to tell, and honestly too fried for it to matter. The dark secret in question is that she got that way due to a childhood filled with abuse from her mother, and there's no question that the drugs were self-medication. To give some context on how bad her mother was, her brother lied about his age to join the Navy ASAP and immediately became an alcoholic. Whole town knew about my grandma, but it didn't hit the fan about my great grandmother until my great uncle had kids and made it very clear to the town why his mother wasn't allowed near them. Edit. Changed to past tense because she disappeared when I was a teenager and we don't know if or how she died, so I haven't mentally marked her as dead yet. But just based on age, yeah, she's probably gone. A lady from my hometown married and killed Phil Hartman. I only found out about it in, like, 11th grade or so. I don't think it's a dark secret, but there's a lot of drug use and closed-mindedness. Aside from that, the sense of community is very strong. Everyone was on drugs or selling it. We had one old factory in a 1,000 people town which was filled to the brim with weed. Our middle school has student parking. A kid tried to kill some other kid and got arrested and killed himself. There isn't one, at least not that I know of. Right now the semi-annual war of the yard signs is going on. Republicans usually have the advantage in number of signs around, but Democrats usually win the most votes. A man with their throat slit was found in a car on one of the busier roads of the town. A few years later, another young man was found dead in a burning car in front of a park. Both were quickly ruled suicides, but no one thinks that is the case.